Tonight, a presidential U-turn. No tariffs, no force against Greenland, and the framework of a possible deal. The day began with Donald Trump demanding immediate negotiations to transfer ownership of the territory to the United States.
You can say yes, and we will be very appreciative, or you can say no, and we will remember.
But now he's dropped his threat to make Europe pay after meeting the Secretary General of NATO.
The deal that people jumped at, really fantastic for the USA, gets everything we wanted, including especially real national security and international security.
How so? So what made the US president change his mind within hours? What will change now for Greenlanders? And after the rupture between Europe and America, what happens now? We'll assess that tonight on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening from a very cold Davos. I'm Yalda Hakim. Europe has been waiting for Donald Trump's next move. All week, all month, the US president has been making his imperialistic ambitions clear. Today, he told leaders at the World Economic Forum that he would not use force to get his hands on this place, Greenland. He describes it as a piece of ice, sitting, he says, in an undefended but strategic location between the United States, Russia and China. Handing the territory over is, in Mr. Trump's words, a very small ask. Have a listen.
We probably won't get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force where we would be, frankly, unstoppable. But I won't do that. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force. All the United States is asking for is a place called Greenland.
Donald Trump speaking a little earlier. Will then something change? The US president back down. Tariffs, which were due to come into force next month, are now off. And according to Donald Trump, negotiations about America's presence on the territory are now underway. Just have a listen to this exchange with our correspondent, Paul Kelso.
How did you do the deal? Come and tell us how you did the deal, sir.
Well, it's a good deal, fair deal for everybody. I think it's a very good deal.
Come and tell us about it, sir. How did you do the deal?
No, it's a great deal for everybody.
Will there be an acquisition of Greenland?
Will Greenland remain Danish?
Will there be an acquisition?
I think they're going to be right.
How did you do the deal, sir? Could you explain it to us? Could you come and give us a word? The world wants to know how you did the deal, sir.
It's a really good deal for everybody. Really good.
Will there be an win for America?
Are the tariffs off the table completely now, sir? Can the people of the UK rest assured the deal's gone?
Based on the fact that it looks like we have the concept of a deal. I think it's a really good deal for everybody. It's a great security, great national. It's a deal that people jumped at. Really fantastic for the USA. Gets everything we wanted, including especially real national security and international security.
How so? Can you give us some details, please?
Well, the deal is going to be put out pretty soon, and we'll see. It's right now a little bit in progress, but pretty far along. It gets us everything we needed to get.
What did Mark Rutte say that convinced you?
Say it?
What did Mark Rutte say?
Well, he's a great leader. I think he's fantastic. The Secretary General was representing the other side, which is really us too, because, you know, we're a very important member of NATO. I've done a lot for NATO. And it's really nice. I mean, it's a deal that everybody's very happy with.
Does it still include the United States having ownership of Greenland like you've said you wanted?
It's a long-term deal. It's the ultimate long-term deal. And I think it puts everybody in a really good position, especially as it pertains to security and minerals and everything else.
How long is it, Mr. President?
Have you already spoken to other European leaders?
What?
Have you already spoken to other European leaders?
Yes, I have.
How long would the deal be, Mr. President?
Infinite.
Did you speak to Denmark? Did you speak to Denmark?
There's no time limit. It's forever.
And how would you ratify the deal?
Will there be money involved?
It's signed forever.
But you haven't signed anything yet, right?
It's a deal that's forever.
Will there be an effect?
In any way, Mr. President?
No,
Will there be an
no
effect?
money. I mean,
Is it a good deal for Europe, sir?
people. What happens is people are out there and they're working it right now. They're working the details of the deal, but it's what's called an infinite deal. It's forever.
That was President Trump speaking to that media scrum, and in that scrum asking all of those tough questions was our Paul Kelso, and Paul joins me now. Paul, I could see you there pushing the president as he was making his way down the stairs, and then he returned again into that scrum.
Yes. I was surprised to see a deal emerging, but I suppose we probably shouldn't be. This entire Davos trip, ever since the weekend when the threat of tariffs, it's only Saturday it emerged against Greenland first, has felt like it's been moving to Donald Trump's agenda. Now, whether this climb down, and let's be absolutely assured, it is a climb down here. It's just a few hours ago, of course, Donald Trump was on stage. Still, when he walked on stage, the threat of potential military action to seize Greenland was on the table, and tariffs were very much still on the table when he walked off the stage. But that climb down has come, he says, after discussions with Mark Rutte. The president's day since he was on stage, he's had some bilaterals, but he's also had this meeting with Mark Rutte, the leader of NATO. He was then having had a dinner with chief executives, a reception. The first sense, perhaps, that something was emerging. We started to see some of the officials, or those in the perhaps within the administration. Jared Kushner left looking quite pleased. There were some smiles on faces as they left. Then a truth social, as is the way with the president, announcing that tariffs are off the table as a deal, not just for Greenland, but the whole of the North Arctic, he says. Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, who has been bombastic and aggressive, some might say, in his time in Davos, he came down and he told us to read the truth, which we'd already done. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, he said, he shouted down to the media, "I told you all to wait till the president got here and calm down. You all jumped the gun." So he was rather delighting in the fact that, in their view, they have wrong-footed commentators as well as European allies. But we have to see what this deal actually contains and just how concrete, an infinite deal we just heard the president say. The terms of this entire disagreement about Greenland have been set in the White House and now apparently resolved. But the bottom line is that he has backed down and walked away from an economic trade war, at the very least, with close allies, after European leaders stood up yesterday and used stronger language than we might expect. There'll be relief in Europe and perhaps a sense of how they might handle the president in future.
Yeah, and I guess, Paul, there is a sort of sense of relief, because you and I felt the anxiety in the air in the lead up to Donald Trump arriving. But I wonder if he has actually stepped back from the brink, or have the Europeans agreed to make some sort of concessions when it comes to Greenland?
Yes, Mark Rutte is cited in this, in the Truth Social. The president talked about him. It's NATO that ultimately was the alliance most in danger here, and it is NATO on which Europe is hanging its hat when it comes to finding a solution. And the president's concerns about security in the high Arctic, the Russian and Chinese interest, and the vulnerability of the Western Hemisphere is real and shared by many. There has been, of course, the argument has been from Denmark, which Greenland is a sovereign part, that they can provide, the US has carte blanche to provide whatever security it wants already. There's no need for this aggressive intervention. We also heard yesterday Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Union, talking about committing more security to the Arctic. She talked about Finnish icebreakers that are already being sold to America. And that was a clear signal that, Donald Trump, as he did regarding Ukraine, leaning on Europe to do its bit for defence. So we'll have to wait and see what the actual details are. But we're talking now in the matter of less than an hour since this emerged, less than that since we heard from the president. I'm not sure we were ever entirely clear of what the boundaries of the disagreement were, because it has all been run from Washington and Europeans have been reacting. So that will emerge in due course. But tonight, at least, trade war off the table, and something has been agreed on Greenland. Donald Trump, as we've heard, is claiming the credit.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see what exactly that is. Paul, thank you so much. Well, let's bring in our James Matthews, who joins me live from Washington. James, I mean, what a whirlwind sort of 48 hours. But I guess this is Donald Trump's world and we're all living in it. There was a sense of anxiety here in the air ahead of his arrival. You know, members of his administration were telling the press and telling people here to relax, calm down, wait till the president comes. And when he did come, he gave a sort of hour-and-a-half long speech, and it does feel for the moment that both the Europeans and President Trump have kind of stepped away from the brink and come up with some kind of framework.
That's right, Yalda. What a day indeed. You know, a day in Davos is it's a long time in politics. I mean, let's rewind to 8 a.m. local time when he took the stage before an audience of the people he had been threatening, old allies, and berated them, insulted them, mocked them, including, you know, mimicking the language of a political leader. He didn't name who she was, but he was doing the accent, reminding his audience of what America had done for them in the Second World War, saying that they'd all be speaking German or Japanese if it wasn't for the United States winning the war and winning big, he said. I mean, he could hardly have been more insulting. And much of what he said in that 90 minutes, we hear it regularly. We hear it on this side of the Atlantic, and the audience on home turf tends to be rather friendlier. I sensed there was a far harder landing in that particular environment, and it didn't seem to deter him. Yes, he said, OK, I'm not planning on military force, but he very much restated that territorial ambition to take over Greenland, said he wanted immediate negotiations on ownership. So that was then. This is now. We're now at a stage following that meeting with Mark Rutte. Now, you know, that didn't last terribly long, but if Mark Rutte, old friend, the man who calls Trump daddy, if he really did turn him round over the finger food on the sidelines at Davos, then he is truly the silver-tongued Trump whisperer. I suspect myself, Yalda, had far more to do with that. I suspect that Trump was looking for an off-ramp going into this. He had articulated his ambitions to take over Greenland, had come to realise over time just how difficult that would be. He saw the resistance, a stiffer resistance than he'd encountered before from NATO allies, queuing up to stand up to him. You know, Macron yesterday talking about how the whole Greenland affair was fundamentally acceptable. Canada's Mark Carney speaking yesterday about how the world, out with the United States, needed to seek new allies. Britain entering the fray with tough talk on standing firm against Donald Trump. Those countries have bent the knee to Donald Trump, but they weren't prepared to bend on Greenland. And I think Trump had clearly got the wind of that.
James, as always, thank you for all of your analysis there. Well, before we move on, I just want to reiterate what's so important about Greenland. Let's just take a look. President Trump has continuously touted the territory's importance for the Golden Dome missile defense system due to its location. A number of European NATO countries, including Denmark, France and the UK, will have sent or will send troops to Greenland as part of a reconnaissance exercise. It's not clear what will happen now that negotiations are ongoing. Well, let's get the thoughts of the Danish MP, Sasha Faxe, who's joined us now on the programme. Thank you very much, Sasha, for joining us. I mean, I just want to get your reaction to what you're hearing tonight unfold. First of all, Donald Trump, in the lead up to this, making very clear his ambitions to acquire Greenland. And now it seems in the last hour or so, there is some kind of deal.
So the thing is, there can't be a deal without having Greenland as part of the negotiations, first of all. And I have heard from the Greenlanders that I know, so we have a Greenlandic MP in Denmark, and she's very clear. This is not a prerogative of Rutte and NATO. They can't trade the underground in Greenland or Greenlandic security without Greenlanders being part of it. And they are very clear, Greenland is not for sale. They are not up for negotiations. So it's not real negotiations. It's two men who have had a conversation, as far as I understand the Greenlanders right now.
So what is the deal then? What do you think they're talking about? If Denmark hasn't been consulted or isn't involved in the conversations, do you think this was some kind of off-ramp for Donald Trump?
It might very well be. I can't say if Denmark hasn't been part of the conversation. You have to distinguish between Denmark and Greenland in this. We're speaking about Greenland. Denmark is another country, and together we are a kingdom, and that collaboration needs to be part of it. And when I hear from the Greenlandic side that they don't see this as anything, it's definitely not a deal. So I truly believe they've had a good conversation about the Arctic, and I think all of us are very interested in security in the Arctic. So that's nothing new. And I'm not sure how a man who calls the president his daddy and follows him around in his narrative just that easily would be a negotiator for anyone.
I guess, do you think that this kind of pulling back from the brink was necessary in this moment, given how tense everything had become? And many people were describing this as a consequential moment, a dangerous moment for NATO, a rupture, an end of an era, and now a new era that perhaps it just required some cooling down.
Mm. Yeah, so my sense is that Trump is actually understanding that it's been too overheated. And this is a way for him to ensure that he can step down a bit and cool down the situation so it doesn't become too much. That's at least how I'm seeing it, and that's a good thing. Getting out of the tariff discussion and finding a way to open the conversation actually leaves us where we were last week, where the vice president in the US and the foreign minister, together with the foreign minister of Greenland and Denmark, made the agreement about having a high-level working group. So now we are back to where we were, and it's not so hot anymore. And that's a benefit for everybody.
But do you think this issue still remains on the table? I mean, Donald Trump did concede with the media that he spoke to that this is a long-term plan. It's not something that, can just be struck in the last few hours. It's going to be part of an ongoing negotiation and conversation.
I think we are far from there. I think we still have the hardest part ahead of us. Of course, we are happy that Trump says he won't use military force, but he does use other means of pressure. Now, tariffs off the table, but his narratives, his distorted information and so forth is still a way to stress the whole situation. So I think that there are no one in Denmark who are like, okay, now this is it. I mean, and in Greenland, by all means not. They are holding on to who they are, and the Danish kingdom and the Danish Parliament will stand strongly behind the wish from the Greenlandic people that Greenland belongs to the Greenlanders.
We're really grateful for your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, with me now is Yaroslav Trofimov, Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent at the Wall Street Journal. Yaroslav, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. You know, we're hearing a mixture of views, speaking there to one Danish MP who is saying there can't be a deal. We aren't involved, the people of Greenland are not involved. So what exactly are these two men talking about?
Well, it's very clear that the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, has absolutely no authority to concede anything related to Danish or Greenlandic sovereignty. I mean, what we're clearly seeing now is President Trump, having seen the groundswell of opposition to his demands in Europe, but also within the US Congress, among the Republicans there, and also among the US business community that's been spooked by the market reaction and by this prospect of a major breakdown in transatlantic relations. They've all pushed back. And he had to take both of his threats off the table. First, in his speech at Davos today, he withdrew his threat of using force to seize Greenland. And then just a few hours later, he annulled these tariffs against several European nations that were supposed to go into effect on February 1st. So basically, he backed out of this crisis that he has created himself. And it's not clear what he got in exchange. Obviously, Greenland already has an American military base. The US has the right to deploy more troops there, and according to an agreement with Denmark that dates back to the 1950s. And Denmark has always said that if you want to increase your presence, talk to us. We're open to it, especially under the NATO framework. And this is also what the Europeans said. The France and other European nations that send their troops to Greenland said would like to be a NATO mission with the US taking part in it. And so, you know, it's all this drama really to get through an open door. But it has created very lasting damage in confidence.
Well, when we hear that there is a deal, do you think that that was a face-saving exercise for everyone involved, that we're negotiating, there's a working group, Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance, you know, the likes of Steve Witkoff are part of that, something that we knew was taking place last week, and this was just to de-escalate the drama and for everyone to save face?
Well, there is no deal. There is a concept of a deal, which is very far away from a deal. I mean, there's been a concept of a deal to end the war in Ukraine for a year now, according to Steve Witkoff. I mean, really, it is the de-escalation. It is a way for President Trump to end this crisis that he created, and that is actually very costly for him, considering also just how unpopular it is within the United States. It's not just the Democrats. The majority of Republicans also oppose the idea of purchasing Greenland, let alone invading Greenland. And so I think at the time when his popularity is tanking, at the time when people are blaming him for inflation and for economic problems in the US, this was a distraction that he really didn't need.
Do you think the Europeans will now see this as some kind of win for them in how they should handle Trump going forward? Because there is another 3 years of his term left. You've been speaking to European leaders all day.
Well, I think there are two schools of thought, because there were two approaches there. There was the very muscular approach by countries like France that have long argued that, you know, you have to show teeth if you don't want to be eaten. And so that's why they were the only ones, apart from Denmark, to send a sizable, serious military force to Greenland. There were others like Italy and like Mark Rutte himself, who argued that, you know, quiet diplomacy with Trump is much more useful. At the end, both of these things were necessary, because it was necessary to show the backbone, and as the French did, but it was also necessary for somebody like Mark Rutte, who has a relationship with Trump, who is able to speak to him, to seal this, the truce really between Europe and the US, which was, really the most serious crisis in transatlantic relations since the 1950s.
Yaroslav, thank you so much for your thoughts. We're going to keep you here with us and come back to you a little later in the programme. Well, let's bring in our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, who joins us live from Kiev. And Deborah, I mean, many would say this felt like an epic distraction. There was meant to be a massive deal, an aid package signed for Ukraine over the course of the week. And of course, the United States didn't send a representative earlier in the week to discuss this. I don't know in the end. We talked yesterday about whether President Volodymyr Zelensky even made it here. Donald Trump mentioned him in his speech, but Ukraine was meant to be a major talking point, and frankly, there's been this distraction with Greenland over the course of the last couple of days.
Yes, there has, and it's been really notable. We had Volodymyr Zelensky saying yesterday that he was delaying his plans to go to Davos. You can only imagine, presumably, his surprise when he heard Donald Trump in his speech saying that he was going to be meeting the Ukrainian president in Davos later that day. The spokesperson for Volodymyr Zelensky later said that the president is still here in Kyiv. It's unclear whether he may have moved, quickly shuffling in your direction. Maybe he's planning some kind of video call. But as of this morning, at least, he was still in the capital. And one of the reasons for his reluctance to move was that he didn't think that the documents that his team, the Americans, the Europeans have been working on for this peace, this prosperity package it's called, this $800 billion package, which is all about future investment, rebuilding, reconstruction in Ukraine, following any peace deal between Kyiv and Moscow, that wasn't yet ready to be signed, and then also hopes for this bilateral agreement between Kyiv and Washington, which would include, of course, those highly sought-after security guarantees. So all of that was supposed to be being signed, potentially, in Davos right now, or at least in the coming hours, and instead all of the focus has been, like you say, on Greenland, on NATO, frankly, on Donald Trump's disdain of the alliance, his lack of seriousness when it comes to dealing with his allies. You can't imagine any other NATO allies treating other member states in the same kind of threatening way and then backing down. It's really head-spinning stuff that is going to deeply shake the foundations of the alliance. And yes, while the acute crisis may have been averted for now, there is no doubt that chronic damage has been done, and allies, if they really want to heed the wake-up call that's been staring them in the face for a long time now, really need to get far more serious about being able to step up and do exactly what Donald Trump says in terms of being able to take much more responsibility for their own defence and for defence in their region.
Yeah, Deborah, while, as you say, a crisis has been averted, a crisis that Donald Trump essentially created, and there was a lot of talk and questions about the future of NATO being discussed. And of course, Ukraine relies heavily on the support of NATO and the ongoing support of NATO. What was the reaction from Kyiv to the drama unfolding here this week?
I mean, I think it was a lot of frustration. Like right here, obviously, the war, the full-scale war that Russia launched nearly 5 years ago now, nearly 4 years ago now, it's about to enter its 5th year. This city, much of it is in darkness because Russia has been stepping up its campaign against power stations, striking power plants, electricity substations, plunging much of Kyiv and a lot of the country into blackouts with families suffering without fuel, without water, without heat, without electricity. And on the front line, of course, the battle's still raging, and yet all of the focus has been on wider diplomacy. So I guess the hope now will be that this Greenland crisis has been, at least the temperature has been taken down on it, that the focus can shift to resolving the Ukraine crisis. And Donald Trump did talk about that, didn't he, in his remarks earlier. And we can hear a bit of what he had to say.
I believe they're at a point now where they can come together and get a deal done. And if they don't, they're stupid. That goes for both of them. And I know they're not stupid, but if they don't get this done, they are stupid. So I don't want to insult anyone, but you got to get this deal done. Too many people are dying. It's not worth it.
envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner are going to be meeting Vladimir Putin in Moscow tomorrow. So further talks between the US at a very high level and Russia. But whether Ukraine is going to be on board with whatever machinations of the deal are now thrown up, that remains to be seen.
Deborah, thank you as always. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim, in Davos. Next up, we'll pause for a moment and focus on Iran. We'll hear about the teenager aspiring rapper killed during the protests after adding his voice to calls for change.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Big Sky News journalist. Ed Conway. Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
I'm Yalda Hakim, live from Davos. Let's go to Iran now, where an official government tally tonight put the number of those killed in mass protests at more than 3,000. Activist networks say that figure is much higher, but confirmation either way is difficult since the regime cut off phone and internet services. It responded with arrests and bullets when the demonstrations erupted this month. posing the biggest threat to Iran's ruling mullahs since they took power in 1979. Our international correspondent John Sparks has been looking at the fate of a 17-year-old protester who was killed and his family's attempts to retrieve his body. And a warning, John's report contains images of body bags in a morgue, which may be distressing.
A budding performer takes to the mic, fueled by determination and a dream of something big. His name, Abulfazla Yagmouri. A kid from a working-class neighborhood near Tehran, his world is a place where rap is banned. So he pursued it here, a homemade studio built in his closet. Life was hard, the obstacles formidable, but his yearning for change would prove fatal. Abulfazla's family didn't want him to attend the protests on January the 8th, the night the regime opened fire on its own people. Abulfazla's aunt, Gita, said the family began to look for the 17-year-old in the early hours. The boy's brother approached a vehicle that belonged to the morgue. The crew were picking up bodies in the street.
They told him we have 3 kids inside the morgue vehicle. 2 of them, they do have their family. We know the names, but one of them is anonymous with no name. And he opened the body bag and it was the face of his brother. And they find him that night.
Neighbors told the family that they watched the young man die.
They were trying to hit him with anything that they had in their hand, with the boots, with the butt of their gun, with everything, while he was bleeding for 40 minutes. And he was gasping for life, right? And then he passed away.
His body was taken here, a facility south of Tehran, where families gather to identify their loved ones. These images recently uploaded to the internet. What happened when Abulfazla's parents got to the morgue to retrieve the body?
They told him, we cannot release the body to you. You have to sign that this kid was part of our army. It was part of IRGC.
The Revolutionary Guards.
Exactly. Otherwise, we are not going to give the body to you.
So Abulfazla's parents were told to sign a document saying their son was serving in the regime's forces when he was killed by protesters.
They didn't agree to sign that, so they asked for money, and then they released the kid.
Is this the so-called bullet tax, the bullet money?
This is what they are talking about, yes.
The allegation here, the family had to pay the authorities for the bullets used to kill their son. That's difficult. The morgue now plays host to these cruel conflicts between victims' families and members of the state. And we see one played out here. A woman warning an employee that people will kill themselves if the bodies aren't released. These premises are steeped in grief. The woman trying to console all those around her. A popular rebellion has been crushed by the regime, but the people will never be the same. John Sparks, Sky News.
Well, let's return now to our fast-moving events here in Davos, where President Trump tonight cancelled his tariff threat on European allies over Greenland. Well, Nicholas Burns served as the US ambassador to NATO between 2001 and 2005 and joins us live now. Thank you so much, Mr. Burns, for joining us here on the programme. I just want to get your assessment on this sort of U-turn that we've seen from President Trump tonight.
Well, it has been a U-turn. It's been a roller coaster of a day. Obviously, the president had to back down from the threat of military force. He had to back down from the threat of terrorists because the Europeans, the United Kingdom, and Canada were united, and they presented a united front, and it was very impressive. And if you saw the market reaction yesterday here in the United States of the S&P 500, you saw the concern from central bankers around the world. I think this was inevitable that the United States miscalculated how Europe would react to this extraordinary threat of a military attack or coercion by the United States against a NATO ally.
Ambassador Burns, I've been speaking to European leaders, diplomats here in Davos over the course of the last few days, and what I've continued to hear is that the United States, President Trump, has stabbed us in the back. And frankly, I would say they probably stabbed it in the front. And I guess while they did present a united front, and this particular crisis, has been averted, do you think, though, this is the end of this saga, or are we likely to see more such crises that the Europeans will have to deal with?
I think it's difficult to say, but I imagine that the wounds here are real and they're going to persist because we've never had any NATO leader threaten to attack another NATO country in the 77 years of NATO. And obviously the denigrations, the criticisms, that the president made this morning in Davos against Europe in general, European society, the functioning of European states, was not a winning argument for an American president to make. And so I think it is on the United States to try to close ranks here and try to behave in a civil way towards our NATO allies. Here's the irony. NATO itself is extremely popular in the United States. In the United States Congress, in both of our political parties, if you took a vote about NATO, 80 to 90% of the members would vote to support NATO. The president has been the outlier here. And I think a lot of damage has been done. And I hope that your viewers who are European, who are Brits, will understand that there's a lot of people back home here in the United States supporting NATO. We want to have good allied relations with great countries who've been with us through thick and thin. And I mean here the United Kingdom and Denmark, both of which, Canada, three of them, served with us in Afghanistan, took major losses of soldiers killed and wounded. We haven't forgotten that, and we're very grateful for it.
Yeah, I mean, you were certainly U.S. ambassador to NATO in those crucial years, 2001 to 2005. And again, when I spoke to Europeans here today, they've all said to me there were body bags, there were coffins with our soldiers coming back because, of course, the United States invoked Article 5. An attack on one was an attack on all, and we all jumped in to support the United States. And now we're in a situation where if the United States had said to us, we want to create more bases, put more troops in Greenland, or have more access to the rare earth minerals, or, protect those shipping lanes, we would 100% welcome it. It's just the way in which this whole affair unfolded.
Well, to your first point, I've got to say I was American ambassador on 9/11 at NATO. We had a brilliant leader in Lord Robertson, a citizen of the United Kingdom, Scotland. We had in the Canadians and Danes an immediate response that they would back us up. The Canadians went into Kandahar province, and they had major losses there. The Danes went into Helmand province and suffered on a per capita basis the greatest losses of any troop contributing nation. So there are thousands of Americans who were there with them, who remember their valor. I think the second point here is the president has announced a framework. What does it mean? There's no clarity to it. There's a lack of detail. But I've got to believe that the United States acquiring Greenland is effectively now off the table because Denmark has stood strong and tall and firm on that issue with complete backup from the British Prime Minister, from the Canadian Prime Minister, and the European Union leadership. And I hope now that the United States will realistically want to work with our NATO allies to support our Arctic security. And it's very important that we deter Russia, which has been very aggressive in the Arctic, and China, which considers itself, it sounds laughable, but they say we're a near Arctic power. And so working with Sweden and Finland and Norway and Canada and Britain and Denmark, this is the way for the United States to protect the Arctic, as we should. We're an Arctic nation, not by trying to take an ally's land away from it. I hope that's where this is now heading.
Yeah, I mean, certainly people I've been speaking to in Washington as well have said this is an epic distraction. Donald Trump should have spoken about Ukraine at this conference, about Iran, about great power competition with China, the issues around Russia, trying to reach some of these peace deals, the ongoing crisis in Gaza. Instead, it's been almost a distraction, a waste of time, and futile, sort of going in circles with NATO allies over Greenland.
Well, that's right. I mean, and I think the key issue here is that the United States should continue to stand with Europe and the United Kingdom and Canada against President Putin, and in support of President Zelensky and the heroic Ukrainian people, as we will soon observe next month, the 4th anniversary of the start of this horrific war. That's a real issue. And as you say, China is a real issue as a problem, a strategic problem for both Europe and the North American countries. That's where we should get back to. It's just a shame that we've had this detour into the madness of thinking that we can take over the territory of an allied nation.
Ambassador Nicholas Burns, thank you so much for joining us here on the program.
Thank you very much for having me on the program. Thank you.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, we'll have more on the presidential U-turn on tariffs after what looks to have been a consequential meeting about Greenland.
I'm David Blevins, one of Sky's US correspondents, based in Washington, D.C. Connor, what did you say to the president? What did you say?
We had a great meeting. He was a great man.
David Blevins from Sky News. Fire chiefs say that they're really stretched to the limit and running out of water. What have you got to say to that? Sky News in the UK. Why do you think the president should intervene on Iran?
I think Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon is an acute threat to the national security of the United States.
Free wherever you get your news.
Go ahead, back white jacket.
Deborah Haynes from Sky News. He called you Daddy earlier.
No, he did. He did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy. Thank you.
Leicester is on its knees.
They've ripped the soul out of my factory and there's nothing left.
It is eerily quiet.
It's constantly on the brink of capacity.
There's overcrowding. It's not a new thing.
It's rough.
There's nothing to hide. Why aren't international journalists allowed in?
Are you worried about escalation?
Of course I'm worried about escalation, which is why my focus is on de-escalation.
The region, I think, is on edge because they are anticipating a retaliation.
Iran retaliates for the US attacks.
Founding principle of the alliance, that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Could Putin attack another NATO country within 5 years?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Big Sky News journalist. Ed Conway. Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Mr. Walker, you're anti-abortion, but 2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir?
I've interviewed some of America's most recognisable politicians.
Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK?
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello, and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now? So a topsy-turvy day here in Davos, and what happens now? With me again is Yaroslav Trofimov, Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent at the Wall Street Journal. Yaro, thanks you so much for joining us here again on the programme. I mean, it has felt like a complete whirlwind, almost like what just happened and where are things going now?
Well, I mean, on one hand, yes, we're kind of back to where it all began. No tariffs, no threat of using force. But I think the damage is very lasting because the damage to the perception that the U.S. can be relied upon as a partner, as an ally, has been shattered. And people in Europe are now talking about de-risking from the U.S., looking for technologies that are not American. It's almost decoupling. So talking about the U.S. in the same way they talk about China and Russia, which is very dangerous. And I think it also has an impact on Ukraine because obviously the entire negotiation about Ukraine right now hinges around the American security guarantees for any deal that President Trump is trying to get negotiated. And the credibility of these guarantees has been greatly diminished by just the very irrational and erratic behavior of the White House over the last several days.
We heard the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney yesterday talk about, the fact that the rules-based order is finished. He's also talked about diversifying economies and a new rules-based order, linking it with China. So you talk about this dangerous moment and the risk of that, but already we're seeing Western leaders looking elsewhere now for partners.
Well, I mean, the nations have no choice, and especially at a time when the U.S. is using trade as a weapon and as an instrument of putting pressure on its partners and allies, it's obvious that nations are looking for alternatives in Europe and in Asia. And if you look at the European Union, the European Union has just negotiated a major trade deal with South American countries, for example, and is trying to negotiate other deals with other nations. Because there are countries that still believe in free trade, and they are trying to find alternatives to the U.S.
The Chinese and the Russians would have been watching this week with glee, because the thing that they wanted more than anything is a wedge between the Europeans, the Americans, the weakening of the NATO alliance. Certainly, it's a massive issue for Vladimir Putin. Do you think they're sitting back tonight as this thing has now, there's been a bit of a U-turn, thinking, no, there's room here where we can still continue to chip away at this?
Yeah, I think, there was certainly a lot of champagne popping and popcorn eating in Moscow in the last several days. And I think now they come to a realization that, well, NATO is not going away and NATO has not broken up over this. But they still have hope because, as we have seen in the last year, President Trump is unpredictable. And, he still has a very profound disdain for Europe, which he voiced today in his speech in Davos. Describing how, it's not the Europe he used to know, how, everything is much worse and the Europeans are not pulling their weight and the European societies are in crisis. And so that's the kind of language that President Putin has long used. Now, as for China, China here in Davos, and if you remember last year at the Munich Security Conference, came out saying, well, we are the only ones who really uphold international law. We are the only ones who upholds, the rules-based order. Obviously, it's not quite true, but at least they pay lip service to this at a time where America under Trump is openly tearing up the rulebook.
Where do you think this leaves Ukraine, for example? Because we know that Donald Trump has no real love for NATO. He's talked about in the past walking away if they don't up defense spending. And of course, Ukraine relies heavily on NATO's support and the ongoing military support from NATO allies.
Well, Ukraine relies on support from the Europeans mostly because the US is not actually paying any money for Ukraine anymore. It's sharing intelligence, and it is selling at a profit weapons to the Europeans, who then provided them to Ukraine. So I think Ukraine has, for now, managed to negotiate away this pressure by Trump quite well. The original peace plan was very unfavorable to Ukraine. Now it's much better. We'll see what happens as this process goes on. Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, who is now also the envoy for Greenland, but for now is going to Moscow to negotiate more and more with President Putin. President Zelensky is likely coming to Davos tomorrow to probably meet with President Trump. So we'll see where it goes, but it's clear that Ukraine right now is not at the top of President Trump's attention, and that's maybe actually a good thing for Ukraine.
It's clear that President Trump also doesn't really think much of European leaders. He's often described them as weak. And the fact that we've now seen this backlash from Europe, do you think that there are lessons that Europe has learned from this drama as well, that they need to stand up to President Trump and say there are red lines and you can't cross them?
Well, I think absolutely. I mean, Europe showed its strength. I think the lesson also of this entire drama is that, if you just cave in and try to appease anyone, then they will come for more. And so by showing that there are real costs to this idea that Trump nurtured of taking over Greenland and forcing him to back down on that, I think strengthened many people in Europe who are saying, okay, well, now we have to really act like the major power that we are, at least in terms of our economies and our ability to sway other countries.
Do you think that Greenland is now off the table completely?
Well, you never know with President Trump, but at least as far as Denmark is concerned, Denmark just reiterated that our red lines remain the same, so no concessions on sovereignty. And, but again, Denmark is open to increasing American military presence, to more, cooperation and defense in the Arctic. But I think for now, at least, an American conquest of Greenland and planting the American flag over Greenland is not going to happen.
Yaroslav, fascinating talking to you, getting your views there. And of course, you've been speaking to European leaders as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, we've seen the drama that's unfolded here over the course of the last few days. And at one point, it felt very much like Europeans had been backed into a corner and they had no choice but to come to the negotiating table. When Donald Trump arrived, there was an air of anxiety and stress here amongst European leaders. And tonight, at least, with this U-turn by President Donald Trump, it does feel like a slight win for Western leaders, for European leaders. But we'll have to wait and see how the coming days and weeks unfold. But stay with me, lots more coming up on the news at 10 next. Good night for now.